heading towards Idlib in northern Syria from Harasta from here. And also there will be 6,000 civilians, mostly made up of their families of those terrorists, who will also be getting out towards Idlib. Now you can see how the Syrian army is also having the tanks that used to carry out battles against the terrorists inside. Those tanks are also exiting from Harasta. Perhaps they're trying now to secure the path that those terrorists will use. So the Syrian army is making all preparations possible in order to ensure the safe exit for the civilians and the terrorists in order for them to reach Idlib. Also, just behind me, you can see now Harasta and the international highway of Damascus, Homs. This is the international highway that terrorists attacked during the past 6 years, blocking any civilian car from using. This was the main highway that linked Damascus to central and northern Syria. And in the depth of the picture, you can see Harasta itself. Those are the buildings of Harasta, particularly Al Thanawiya quarter, the first quarter of Harasta from this side of the international highway that links Damascus with Homs and northern Syria. Perhaps now, after the terrorists get out from Harasta with their families and after the Syrian army enters those locations and those positions, maybe this international highway can open once again. It has been closed for over 6 to 7 years now. The Syrian army might be able to open it after terrorists leave this area. And as you can see, that the buildings are directly on around the streets, around the international highway. And those are the buildings that terrorists used in order to open sniper fire at the civilian cars that used to exit. Also now the terrorists have launched a couple of mortar shells from inside Eastern Ghouta areas around Harasta at the residential quarters of Barze in the Damascus, of course, in the government-held sides over there, killing 2 people and injuring 4 others. This is also breaking news that just came out. So the buses are now on standby, waiting to enter, at least 40 of them. This will not be the only exit point from Harasta. There's another exit point from Al-Mawarid Al-Ma'iyya building close to the area that we are in, where also buses will be taking out the militants and their families out. So far, also reports coming from inside the Harasta areas confirm that just now, and according to the deal itself, there was an exchange of prisoners between both sides, the militants and the Syrian army. The Syrian army handed over 5 militants who were captured before during the battles, and also the terrorist groups inside handed over to the Syrian army about 13 army personnel who were also imprisoned. They were taken as hostages by the terrorist groups during the fighting inside Eastern Ghouta. We're expecting that in the coming hours, more and more empty buses will be entering Harasta to evacuate the civilians and also pick up the militants who will be leaving towards Idlib in northern Syria. Also, militarily speaking, inside Eastern Ghouta, where the Syrian army, as you know, is waging an offensive since last month against the terrorists. Inside, the army took control of Ain Terma Valley and started attacking terrorists inside Ain Terma itself. And this would mean that the army is further encircling terrorists, and it is expected, and according to officers I have spoken to over here on this exit point, that perhaps more and more armed groups inside Eastern Ghouta might be accepting similar evacuation deals, because they know that the army is now imposing a full and tight siege on them, and they have no chance unless they get out on those buses.
Mohammed, just quickly tell us then, just clarify for us how much progress the Syrian army has been able to make in fully liberating Eastern Ghouta. What point are we at right now?
Well, at least 70% of Eastern Ghouta have been secured so far following the military operations. Now you can see ambulance vehicles getting out, the sick and injured, perhaps civilians. You can see them right now exiting from this corridor. This is an ambulance vehicle that just came out, and you can see here perhaps maybe some of the injured militants, injured. Oh, I just received confirmed news that those are the Syrian army personnel who were prisoners in the prisons of the terrorist groups inside. You can see them now getting out, as I have just been telling you that there was a successful exchange of prisoners between both sides, the Syrian army and the militants. Those are the Syrian army personnel who have been for months captured or taken as hostages during the battles by the terrorists of Ahrar al-Sham. They are just now getting out after this successful exchange of prisoners. We're expecting now this deal to continue being, of course, implemented here successfully, since that this is the first stage of implementing this evacuation deal. The first stage was the exchange of prisoners, of course. Then buses will continue to enter to pick up those 6,000 civilians and also the 1,500 militants who are supposed to get out from here. Regarding your question on the military situation and the advances of the Syrian army in Eastern Ghouta is now in control of over 70% of that militant-held region. Of course, operations have been happening since February, and the army continues to encircle areas there after dividing the region in general into three main areas: Douma, Harasta, and the rest of the towns that the militants are controlling, which are in particular Arbin, Zamalka, Hazze, Ain Tarma, and several small other quarters inside. But now, as the Syrian army advances, it is encircling and tightening the noose on those terrorists, which means that the terrorists have no chance but either continue fighting and be killed over there inside, or accept such a deal of getting out. Those getting out today are the so-called Ahrar al-Sham terrorists. There are also the Jaysh al-Islam, which is known to be Saudi-backed. Those are mainly stationed in Douma. There are also Faylaq al-Rahman, which is also a terrorist group that has been fighting alongside the al-Nusra front inside Eastern Ghouta. Those groups have not decided yet to leave or exit. They have not accepted such a deal. Ahrar al-Sham is the first terrorist group that accepted to get out from Eastern Ghouta in such a deal.
All right, Mohammed, we'll leave there at that. But of course, as always, we appreciate your reporting for us from on the ground there in Syria's eastern.